Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today. We Senator, New York State District in New York and City. Yeah. So welcome to the show. Good morning, sir. Welcome. How are you, Senator?
I'm well, thank you. It's nice and sunny in New York today.
Very nice to hear that. I mean, nice. So we would like to know a little bit about yourself, I mean, your career, like, and how you started as your uh, school board, and then the city council, and then the journey to state senate. So I would really appreciate if you can talk about your journey, please.
Sure. Well, my journey started when I was born in New York City in December 1950. And I grew up in New York City in the New York City public school system. Graduated from college about 75 miles north. We have a state university system, and I was fortunate enough to attend State University of New York at New Paltz, which is about 80 miles north of New York City, where I met my beautiful wife, and we found an affordable place to live in New York City. And thereafter, three of our children were raised in the neighborhood that I now serve. I serve the 31st Senatorial District, which is 13 miles of Manhattan from the most northern end all the way past Midtown in the Upper West Side to the Chelsea area of Manhattan. Approximately 330,000 constituents that I represent in the Senate. But I didn't start there. I started by being involved in what I say, and many people know, is the most important thing that we can give our children, and that is a good education. Education, I've said, is the key to uplift all families. And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your income is, or whether you're black or white or Latino or Indian, it doesn't matter. Education is the key. So I got involved with our local school, and they put me on the executive committee, and then I became the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And as you know, Ways and Means deals with the money. Uh, and then I was elected vice president and president. And then thereafter, when a school board vacancy existed, that parents association said to me, "We are going to run you for the school board." And I ran, and I won election basically from my geographical area of my school, but also of the entire district. It was mainly, though, my geographical area. And I was elected to 5 terms of office for 15 years. Each term was 3 years. And during that 15-year tenure on Community School Board 6, which is the most northern school board district in Manhattan, I served 5 terms, and I was elected the president of the school board for about 7 or 8 one-year terms of being elected. But thereafter, when we in New York City, we have a city council. That's our legislative body in the city of New York, city council. There are 51 members of the city council, and the district that I ran in was district number 7. That's my geographical area at that time. And so I ran for the city council. There were 10 people running, and I won, and I was elected and took office on January of 2002, where I served 12 years as a member of the City Council of New York, representing my district, and I chaired the Education Committee for 8 years. I was on the Finance Committee, I was on the Land Use Committee, Housing Committee, and when you talk about the City Council of New York, the two most important committees are finance, which is money, and land use, because people will tell you the real estate industry basically owns New York. I would beg to differ. I think the people own New York, and then we, through our representatives and their collective actions, makes our elected public officials accountable for all of the issues and concerns that impact us. So, but I served 12 years in the city council, which was 4 terms of office. The first 2 terms was a 2-year term and a 2-year term, because every 20 years the lines are redrawn, and as a result of that, it's every 20 years there's a 2-year term instead of a continuous 4-year term. So after serving in the city council for 12 years, I ran for borough president and did not win. And then I ran for the state senate. The 3rd time is a charm. So the 3rd time running for the state senate, I won by 10,000 votes in November of 2000, in the primary, that is, of June of 2018. And so I'm finishing my 1st term of office, a 2-year term in the state senate. And now we serve not only in New York City, but the headquarters is Albany, New York. That's the capital of New York State. So now I was elected in the Democratic primary for my 2nd term of office. I have to win in the general election in November, and then I will begin my 2nd term as a state senator in January of 2021. So that's my tenure as far as the electoral process. But let me tell you, the most important part for me, if you look at my Facebook, is what's the most important. I'm a parent activist. I'm there fighting for our children to get the quality education they rightfully deserve. And just FYI, for your information and your viewers, when I was on the school board, we filed a lawsuit against the state of New York because we felt they were not giving us enough money to provide our children with the opportunity to get a sound basic education. And a sound basic education is the minimum standard that the state is allowed to give. The minimum standard as per the New York State Constitution. And as a result of that lawsuit, I walked 150 miles from the Appellate Division Court. The Appellate Division Court is the 2nd highest court in the state of New York. Not the U.S. Supreme Court we're talking about, but the 2nd highest court in the state of New York. When they said that the state was only obligated to educate our children equal to 8th grade and in reading, or 6th grade in reading and 8th grade in math. And I said, no way is that the minimum education, when we are arguing that every child should graduate from high school knowing how to read, knowing how to write, knowing how to serve on a jury, and being able to hold competitive employment. And so as a result of that decision, I said to our attorney, Michael Rebell, that when we go to the highest court in the state of New York, the Court of Appeals, I will walk all the way to Albany. So in 2003, from May 1st to May 8th, we walked from the appellate division that said that the state was only obligated to educate our kids at 6th and 8th grade in reading and math. We walked from there all the way to the highest court in the state of New York. And when we arrived there, we had a big press conference. And the funny part is, on the 7th day of the walk, our executive director that was leading this, Samira Ahmed, she was our deputy director. She said, Robert, we're going to be in court tomorrow. So please make sure you wear your suit so you can look nice and professional, and just like I'm wearing now, right? And I said to her, Samira, I didn't bring a suit. I want to go in there after walking 8 days, smelling as funky as I can be, so the judges will be able to smell me from the back of the courtroom where I am. And I walked in with others wearing a T-shirt with buttons and stickers, and the theme of the walk was walk a mile for a child. And do you know, after 13 years of litigation, where we was at the highest court on this case for 3 times over the course of 13 years, the end result was about $16 billion for the children of New York City. $11 billion to build new buildings and make major repairs, and about 5.5 billion in expense money to hire teachers, textbooks, computers, all of the things that you need, social workers, nurses, all of the things that you need in order to make sure that our children receive the best education they can. And in New York State, New York City has the highest number of students of 1.1 million children, the most than any other city in the entire United States of America. So, and that's what we're getting ready to go through now. But that's like a history of my involvement. But I've been a fighter for education, and that's what I will continue to do. Right now in the state Senate, I am on the New York City Department of Education Committee. I am on the statewide education committee. I am on the higher education committee. So all of the committees in the New York State Senate that has to deal with education, I'm a member of. And I chair the cities committee of the state Senate. So that's just a little bit as far as my progress. And so when I talk about progress and children's education, you should know that our three girls, Sadia, Asmahan, and Sumaya, they went to our local school, which is a K-8 school, kindergarten through 8th grade. And then they went to high school. And two of them went to public university, State University at Buffalo, New York, State University at New Paltz, where my wife and I went. And then the youngest one, she went to Juilliard. She was a dancer. So those are our three girls. And one now is an MD. The middle one, Asmahan, is a math specialist, but now she's an assistant principal. And Sumaya works in the dance industry. So that's just a little bit how important it is when I go back to education is the key to uplift all families.
Very nice to hear your story. I mean, a journey. I mean, as a from the school, primarily it has been education, but let it be the public or your own personal life, which is nice to hear, and also your journey from school board to the city council and Senate. And you also mentioned when you say the city council, usually cities are managed by the real estate people. Many, in even a small city or a big city. I mean, that's what I've been talking to many of the council members and the mayors. We see the contribution of realtors into the politics of the city council. So we'll get to those points a little later. So I would like to ask you, I mean, one thing about right now, the COVID-19 is another thing which is gripping all over every part, most of the countries and all over the world. So I want you to know your views and your perspective on the effect of the COVID-19 in New York State and New York City and overall in US, and how did the local and the state level and the federal level governments handled it, and how is it right now?
Well, COVID-19 basically has changed New York City, New York State, and even the world is not going to be the same as it was prior to COVID-19, the pandemic. In New York City was the epicenter of COVID-19 in the United States going back. Fortunately, our governor was a strict enforcement of putting things in place as far as making sure that people wash their hands and sanitizers and face masks and social distancing of 6 feet. And you know, most people adhere to that, and obviously it's imperative that everyone adhere to the standards of to put a clamp on this virus. And I say that because New York City basically shut down the schools, I think in March, but I had, I guess, tweeted and text that the city should close the schools a week before the mayor decided to close the schools. Clearly, if you're following it worldwide, in which I do, because I know not only I watch our local stations in New York City. New York One is a local TV station. I follow CNN, but I go every evening and sometimes even during the day on Al Jazeera, and I look what's happening worldwide, because you don't get the global picture worldwide by watching New York News or CNN. You get little snippets of it, but you get more in depth from Al Jazeera. And so, as it used to be on regular TV programs, and now I have to go online in order to find out what's happening. But I say to you that right now, New York State is under 1% of infection rate, about 0.71 or 0.79, something like that, which is great compared to the rest of our country and many other parts of the world. But it takes discipline. It takes making sure that we do everything that we can not to spread the virus to other people. And as you know, and the world knows, you can be asymptomatic, meaning you have no symptoms, and you can have the virus. My wife and I, we went about maybe a month ago, 5 weeks ago, and we were tested for the virus and the antibodies. And so the virus came back negative. So we were pleased. We went to go visit our grandkids in Virginia. Now we're back home. And now we're getting ready to help my nephew move. He's moving from Brooklyn, New York to New Jersey. But his wife is 6 months pregnant. So my wife and I, right before we go to help them, a day before or 2 days before, we are going to get a rapid testing to make sure that we are okay. So when we go to help them to move. And I think that people have to be proactive within yourselves and with your family members and everything we do. Because if you love your family, and if you love your grandmother, your grandfather, your uncles and siblings, you must follow the precautions that are put out. And that is, everyone should have a face covering so that you're not spreading or any infections. You must be able to constantly, when you're going out and going to the market or open up doors and things like that, then you must, as soon as you get in, you need to wash your hands. And sometimes my daughter says to me, Dad, you didn't wash your hands long enough, because they talk about 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So that means, you got to count 1, 2, 3, and a lot of soap. And I'm showing it because this is what has to be done in order to stop the infection. And then if you cannot wash your hands, if you have any type of sanitizer, then obviously we all know how to do that. And I'm just doing it here. You have to be able to make sure you get it, and in the fingers and everything like that. So these are the things that we have to do. And then we cannot go into crowds, because when you go into crowds, that's when you can be infected. And especially when it's indoors, more so than outdoors. When it's outdoors, you have the air, you have the distance, and all of that is very appropriate. So while we have improved dramatically in New York City, in New York State, the rest of the country is in trouble. And let me just say, they're in trouble, in my opinion, thanks to our president, who has basically, we know what he's done. He's saying, no, you don't need masks, or you don't have to wear this, you don't have to be tested. The more people that tested, this, that, and the other. You cannot believe anything that our president says. We listen to the experts, the health experts, and they are the ones that are guiding us. And if we listen to them, the better off we will be. And if people talk about, when are we going to get back to work? I can't afford the apartment that I live in. I'm running short of food. All of the things that we need jobs and opportunity to keep the cycle of people earning money to work. So if we don't follow these simple things as far as mask, cleaning, and distance, and getting tested, and everyone in New York City can be tested for free. Okay? So that's what we must do in order to keep our families and everyone safe. And so hopefully everyone will then, the reduction rate will go down and down and down and down and down and down to where it's below 1 and then be eliminated. That's what we all want. We, no matter where we live at around the world, that's what we want. But it's going to take that discipline. And our governments are going to have to help. And let me say this to you. And I'm talking to you and I'm talking to your viewers who may not know what's happening in New York City, New York State. New York State is about $15 billion in the red right now. And New York City is about $9 or $10 billion in the red. How do they get in the red? Because the engine of employment, jobs, tourism, working, basically shut down. And not only in New York, but in many places around the world. And as a result of that, that's what the type of negative balance that we're in right now. So we're hoping and praying that the federal government will come through with billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, so that every municipality and every state will have funds in order to survive. If not, let me just say this to you, and we have said this loud and clear. If not, then the state legislature in New York State, both the Senate, which I'm a member of, and the Assembly, the other house, must come together in order to increase taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers. And both leaders of the legislative body, my leader, Andrea Stewart Cousins, who is called the Majority Leader, the first woman in the history of the state of New York to be elected a Majority Leader, who also happens to be a woman of color. And Carl Heastie, he's the Speaker of the New York State Assembly. So, and he also is from the Bronx, and they have come together approximately 2.5 3 weeks ago to say that we must raise revenue. And if we have to raise revenue on the wealthiest New Yorkers, then we will do that. So the message is loud and clear. We need help from the federal government, but if the federal government doesn't act, then we have to act ourselves. And so that's the direction that we go in order to deal with the results of the pandemic. That's what I have to say.
Thanks for sharing your views and the perspective on the how the pandemic is and how the governments are acting locally and the federal level. That's good. You brought up one point. I mean, you are planning to tax the wealthy people in the state of New York. I understand the theory behind that one, but at the same time, if you look at the situation right now in the New York City, especially, people are what I've been reading is people are leaving the city and moving to the suburbs. I mean, let it be the New Jersey or other areas. So because many other things. I mean, one important aspect we didn't talk about is the Black Lives Matter movement. Due to the Black Lives Matter movement, which is no doubt it is important for us, but at the same time, the riots, which has joined the Black Lives Matter, has created this panic in the people, and some of them are leaving the New York State. So I'm joining 2 points. One is when the people are, one is the Black Lives Matter and the riots, and one side with these things, the people are leaving the state, city and state. So how are you going to collect the taxes from them?
Well, let me talk about people leaving the state. The only people that are leaving that left New York City during the pandemic, okay, are the wealthiest New Yorkers. And where did they go?
Yeah.
They went to the Hamptons on Long Island. Or if they own a summer home in upstate New York or somewhere else, then they left. So those individuals uh, are wealthier New Yorkers. Those that are not in the middle class, but they may be in the upper middle class where they have a home or more than one house, or they're the wealthiest New Yorkers. The average family in New York City, in New York State, they're not going anywhere because the average family has nowhere else to go but their home that they live in right then and there. Whether it's an apartment where I live, I don't own my own home. I live in an apartment right now. And you can see I'm in my living room, and that wall behind you is the foyer area where to the left is where people come into the apartment. So the average New Yorker is not going anywhere. With respect to people leaving because of the riots, no, I think that Black Lives Matter is not about rioting. Black Lives Matter is about bringing the attention to everyone uh, that blacks, majority blacks and people of color have been killed at the hands of police departments around our country. And the prime example that lit a fire around the world was George Floyd, where we, due to social media and everyone videotaping now these days, because everyone has a cell phone, 8 minutes, and I think rounded off to 8 minutes and 35 seconds, we watched this man die because a police officer had his knee on his neck, and two others, which were out of view of the camera, were on his back. And in essence, they basically took his life. And that's why they were fired. That's why they're being prosecuted. And that's what Black Lives Matter is about. It's not only George Floyd, but so many others who were either shot in the back or shot and killed as a result of, police, the systemic racism that exists. And police should be about community policing and not a military with machine guns and tanks and bazookas and all of that. That's crazy. And that's not what it's about. And that's why municipalities all over the country, New York, I'm talking about New York City and New York State and the country, are looking at revising their police departments to be more of one where they will be working in collaboration with the people of the district. And that's what this is about. And so, are some riots taking place? Yes, in certain aspects of it, but it's as a result of a reaction to what's happening. And when I say reaction to what's happening, not only about the Black Lives Matter, which I explained about the killing of blacks and systemic racism that exists, but also as a result of people are desperate, getting desperate. And especially if you lost your job and you don't have food, things like that, people are taking things in their own hands, which they should not be doing. So in New York City, the city of New York, is giving food to anyone who needs it. Okay? The city of New York is giving regular testing to anyone that needs it. There are food banks all over the place. The state of New York and the city of New York are giving masks and sanitizers. In fact, we've had those. We've had food bank giveaways, myself and my staff, and we will continue to do that because one of the things that we've established is a program called mutual aid. Mutual aids are basically, we put pods together for neighborhoods where neighbors are helping neighbors during this pandemic. And so if, for example, if you needed help because you cannot go to the store to get groceries, then during the mutual aids and pods, neighbors are helping neighbors to go get food. If you need me to go get medication from the pharmacy, I would go and do that. Or if you need us to sign you up for food that is delivered by the city of New York, we would do that. And so during this time of a pandemic, we cannot say, no, let me lock my doors and not let anyone in. We need to open up and say, how can we help one another to survive this pandemic? That's what brotherhood and sisterhood is about. And that's what we have to do, not only in New York City, New York State, the United States, but all over the world. Because we're all brothers and sisters of this universe that we live in.
Very nice. I mean, I appreciate. I mean, the message and also the New York State and city which are doing the community food bank and all those things, and also the neighborhood part, which are very good initiatives. For sure, as you said rightly, these things should be adopted all over the world. And coming back to the police and this thing, I mean, we do understand there are issues. I've been had spoken to a few of the police officers because they also mentioned that, I mean, there are some gaps in the training process. So there are some issues in handling, as you said, mentioned systematic racism. But at the same time, many of the police officers are also there. We see good police officers who help the community people, the kids, and the other people for sure, and we respect all of them. There are few people who are, I mean, who kind of who are bad apples in a basket, and then that's creating all this issue, which we totally understand. But at the same time, you also were campaigning for the criminal justice system. So that is another important thing for the minority communities. So what is that you are fighting for, and what are your views, and what changes you would like to bring to the criminal justice system?
Well, we in the state legislature has already revised some of the criminal justice things. So, for example, if there are low petty crimes where people have not been injured, then if you let's assume that you went and robbed a store and ran out with some jewelry or some food or whatever the situation is, um, you will go in front of a judge and there will be no bail set, meaning you'll be able to leave and then go as long as you follow up on your court appearances. Okay, so that was extremely important that the Democratic legislative body basically passed last year. So where there were no bail, where people were sitting in jail because they could not afford a $500 bail. $500 is not a lot of money, and it depends on who you ask. But in the United States, $500 is not a whole lot of money for bail. And so, as a result of that, people should not be in jail. Let's assume I had a job and I'm working, right? And I'm living with my family, or I'm renting a room, or I'm renting an apartment. When I go to jail, and if I can't afford $1,000 or $500, then I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my home, and then what am I going to do? I'm going to depend on the uh, the local government to give me assistance, or I'm going to go and do what I have to do to survive, which is a negative thought. Because if you don't have money, if you don't have a place to live, and if the government doesn't help you, you're going to find food and survive any way you can. And we don't want people to go into a negative framework. Okay, and that's why going back when I originally came on, I talked about the importance of everyone getting a sound basic education, because it's been proven that the more education you receive, the more likely you will get a good job, more likely than you will be able to take care of and support yourself and your family. Extremely important in the process. But the criminal justice system, like elder elder release, you have people that have been in prison for years, 10, 15, 20 years, 25 years, and now they're elderly. And research has shown that the elder ones that have come out of prison, they do not commit additional crime. So there's a movement to release the eldest ones in prison that may have been incarcerated for that period of time. And then also there is eliminating solitary confinement, because research has shown that solitary confinement drives people crazy to being locked a little cube with all walls, and then you lose your sanity. And then when they come to let you out, you've gone lost your sense of whatever, and then you start doing other things and get into trouble, or you attack someone, and then what do? They put you back into solitary confinement. So that's a no good situation. What we made to make sure is that the mental health services and health services are there for the incarcerated individuals. So that's what the movement is about, to treat people that are incarcerated more humanely, and not just as prisoners, but we need to rehab people. So I know years ago, when people were incarcerated, if they were not in, they didn't finish high school, they can, in prison, get a high school diploma. They can go to college, and they can get skills. And so that when they came out, they have the opportunity to be reemployed into society. And so all of that is the movement. And there's legislation to make sure that New York State, our pension funds, and our money from the government is not used for private prisons, because private prisons is a business. It's about profit. It's about money. And so if you run a private prison, you want more people to come in and be incarcerated because you're going to be earning more money. So that's why we, as the state legislature, do not want any of our monies to be invested in private prisons. Okay, so that's some of the things that's happening in New York State and around the country.
So I understand very nicely said this one. What I read very in a small law journal. I mean, the law and the should be a system which should help the culprit to recover and understand his problems and come back and assimilate in the society. But the way the system is right now, looks like it is making it harder for them to come back. So I got your theory. I hope things will change the way you many of the people are expecting it. But I want to ask you one
Let me tell you
question.
what happened. Just one little thing about in Florida. In Florida, if you were arrested for a felony and you went to prison, right? Then once you got out, as a convicted felon in Florida, your rights to vote were eliminated. That means you could not vote any other time as a result of your conviction of a felony and were going to prison in Florida. The Florida legislature, and I believe the governor, they eliminated that, where once you have served your time, that you re-registered to vote, you have a right to vote. And so part of the movement going way back, was most of the people that are incarcerated, in essence, in prisons around this country, are people of color. And so basically this is a way to take away their voting rights, to disenfranchise them. So now in Florida, people have a right, after serving their time, to register and vote. In New York State, only those that are on parole, meaning, let's say you get out of prison, you're on parole for 3 years afterwards. Once you finish parole, where you go into and you speak to your parole officer once a month or whatever the time frame is. So once you're off parole, then you are eligible to vote again. So, and even if, let's say, if I'm arrested, as an example, if I'm arrested for a purse, I snatched a woman's purse, for example, and I'm in jail, but I have not been convicted of anything, but I'm in the jail waiting trial. And going back to what I said as far as criminal justice, if no one was hurt, then more than likely I would be released on my own recognizance, meaning no bail, and so I'm home as long as I show up to court. But even those that are incarcerated in jail, they still have a right to vote because they have not been convicted of anything. So we want to make sure that once people serve their time, that they have a right to exercise their right to vote.
Gotcha. Very nice. Thank you. And I want to ask you one question here. I mean, we have been talking about the education and enriching the enrichment and criminal justice and all these things for especially in the minority communities for a long time. Why is it taking so long? I mean, not only here, many other places I see this one, but I mean, I want to hear your perspective. Why is it taking so long? What does it take for everybody to come up to the same level playing field?
I'm laughing because um, if you understand the history of our country, um, and mind you, I'm still trying to find my history because my mother was born in Athens, Georgia, in the Deep South. She was born in 1926, and so her parents and grandparents were owners. They were slaves of owners in that area. And so down in Athens, Georgia, one family owned a lot of slaves, and the last name was Willingham. And so that was my family's, my mother's side of the family, that's what they were, Willinghams. And so I'm still trying to find the history of that, where I know that my mother is buried down in Athens, Georgia, in the 1930s when my grandmother died, uh, growing up poor. There's one stick in the ground with her name on it, but after time, that stick is gone. And so I want to eventually go down there in order to put a gravestone for my grandmother in Athens, Georgia, trying to still find my history on my mother's side of the family. But why is it taking so long? Because racism still exists. And we live in a capitalistic society where basically you have the wealthiest and the masses. And so the 99% of the people are the masses that are doing all of the work. And in New York State, we have 119 billionaires that are worth about $600 billion. And besides that, thousands and thousands of millionaires. So to go back when I said that we were willing to, if we don't get the federal help, to tax the wealthiest New Yorkers, those are the ones we're talking about. Not the average New Yorker that may be worth earning 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. No, those that are earning $1 million or more, whatever their tax bracket is, a little bit more. So, but also to get back to responding to specifically to your question, in New York State, for example, New York State has been controlled by Republicans in the state Senate for decades and decades. And so as a result of that, all of the policies that they were putting forward and laws that they were changing had, in my opinion, other people would disagree, a negative impact on cities, more specifically New York City. Okay? And so remember we talked about in the beginning that some people say that the real estate industry owns New York. Well, the Republicans and the governors, more than one governor, curry favored to the real estate industry for years and years and years. And now that has changed as a result of both houses of the legislative body, the Assembly, 150 members of the Assembly, and the New York State Senate, 63 members. The Assembly has been in hands of the Democrats for a long time. Just in 2019, in January, the Democrats now are in leadership of the state Senate. And so as a result of that, we took action to help over 1 million renters in New York City and renters in the entire state of New York. And so that's where some of the changes are taking place from a legislative point of view. And when you talk about rent regulated units in the state of New York, meaning you're the owner and you own, let's say, 5 buildings, right? So, and I'm a renter. I said to you, I'm a renter. In my district, the 31st Senatorial District in New York State, I have the most rent regulated units in the entire state of New York. The second highest is my colleague Gustavo Rivera from the Bronx. He has the second highest rent regulated units in the entire state of New York. So what we are looking after is trying to look after the average person, whether they're renters or owners, especially during this pandemic. So we have some legislation where it's cancel rent. So during this pandemic, we want to cancel rent during the entire period of the state of emergency declared by the governor. And let's assume that ends, let's say, January or February of next year, 2021. The legislation basically says, and 9 months thereafter, people will not have to pay rent because they're struggling to survive. But also, a lot of my colleagues said, what about the homeowners? What about the mortgages they can't pay? Well, there's legislation that says, okay, your mortgage, if you cannot afford to pay your mortgage from April, May, June, July, August, September, whatever, then that is put on the back, way at the back of your mortgage, and let's say your mortgage is another 15 years. So that's, they put that at the back. So there's different legislation that will help people during this pandemic. And so all of the actions are done from a legislative point of view, both at the local level and at the state level, and also at the federal level. And that's why I will be so happy in January when I was getting ready to say Barack Obama, but when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their oath of office to be the president and vice president of the United States of America. And as you know, Kamala Harris's mother is from India. And so there is, I know, a lot of pride there overall about Kamala Harris being the vice president candidate for the Democratic Party. And God willing, hopefully in January, she'll be sworn in as the vice president of the United States of America. I am hoping that on behalf of all of the people, not only in New York City, New York State, but the United States, but on behalf of all of the people in the world, because I think overall we will be better off as a country under the leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Very nice to hear about the Renters Act, Renters and Landlord Act, which is helping many people in the New York State and New York City. And I'm proud. I don't know the results yet, but I'm proud to be associated from same origins of Kamala Harris, no doubt about it. We share a few things common, the roots, common roots. So I'm very sure, for sure, proud of it, for sure. And coming back to the last question of the show today, I'm certainly you also have another things. I want to take another time, some other time, talk about other topics in detail later on, if you permit us. The last question is, you also mentioned multiple times, the education is important thing for anybody to come enrich themselves and come out of the poverty and then the other thing. So why is it taking so long? Again, the same thing. Struggling. Especially the minority communities, schools. School. Let it be in the Detroit. I live in suburbs of Detroit, so I understand. I hear in the news all the time. The schools of Detroit are struggling and they're closing. Those kind of things. So why is it taking so much long for minority communities to improve their school systems? You are the one, who've been leading and be in the process system for a long time. So I would like to hear more from you. What exactly is happening on the ground level?
Well, it takes, it's a transition. It takes time. So like in New York State, it's New York City rather, going way back, City University of New York, which is our city colleges in New York City, were free for everyone. And only around 1968, 69, they went to a tuition type situation. And right now, you have many people that are working, have a family, working more than one job, just trying to pay their school fees to get an education, because they realize how important it is to have a degree, whether or not it's an associate's degree, which is a 2-year degree, or a 4-year degree, or the skills to go into nursing or other skills such as, air conditioning and heating systems as a trades, and depending on things like that. So it takes time, but we must invest in education to make sure that every child is assessed, to make sure if they need help, where if they need if they have special needs, they're given those needs in order to get the best education they can. But that's why I go back to the New York State Constitution's in the decision of the lawsuit that I filed with Michael O'Dell, our attorney. It said every child should graduate high school knowing how to read, knowing how to write, knowing how to serve on a jury, and being able to hold competitive employment. And when we say competitive employment, we're not talking about repetitive, like flipping burgers all day long. We're talking about competitive employment. We want people to grow up to be a teacher, an educator, an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, a mechanic, all of the things that make society runs. And that's what we want. And is everyone going to be at the same level? No, because each and every one of us are different. Okay? But we want to make sure that they get that, and the government must make sure that that happens. And if it means to tax the people so that there's enough funds to do that, then that's our responsibility as elected public officials. And I've always said, if people are not happy with their elected public officials, don't sit and complain. Do something about it. Register to vote. Fill out your census. In the United States, as you know, we have to fill out our census, because when everybody, no matter who you are, whether you're a citizen, whether you're a permanent resident, or whether or not you're undocumented, everyone fill out a census, because the census determines how much federal funds your state and your municipality receive, and also how many members of Congress that your state will have. And so that's all part of a somewhat complicated puzzle, but it's not a 1,000-word puzzle. It's only, make it very simple, a 50 or 100-word puzzle that we have to come together like that to make it work. So that's what we have to do in order to ensure that every child gets a good education. And in New York City, their planned opening is a blended learning at this point in time, but there are many people, many parent activists, the unions that represent the New York City Department of Education, the principals union, the teachers union, the custodial engineers that clean the schools, their union, the school aides, DC 37, Local 372, all of them have said they do not feel that the system is ready to open in New York City. And they're saying it needs more time. How much more time? At least several more weeks, the end of September, at least. But then again, as you know, we follow the news around the country, and especially some of the colleges, some of the young people, they're all over the place hanging out, no masks, and enjoying themselves. And many of the colleges are now shutting down and going to remote learning. So we have to be able to maintain the discipline that we talked about earlier in your program, in order to make sure that we get society, we get our jobs and industries back to working, small businesses, so that people can survive.
Thank you very much for your views and the perspective, on these topics. And do you have any message to the audience? And if somebody wants to be part of your campaign, how do they can reach you? Can you say those things, please?
Sure. Well, I am running for re-election this November, and if people wanted to reach my campaign, they can go to voterobertjackson.com on the internet, and or I have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts. So there's many ways from a social media point of view. People can do that in a search engine, voterobertjackson.com. That's how people can reach me. Or if they want to text me, they can do it on Instagram. I was going to give my cell number, but I'm not going to do that. But I say that a direct email for me, if they want to email me, they can email me at robertjacksonnewyork@gmail.com. So you spell out the word New York. robertjacksonnewyork@gmail.com. No space, no dots, no nothing.
Very nice. Any final words to the audience?
Sure. First, let me thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in front of your audience. And I understand the audience is not only here in the United States, but all over the world. And especially in India, especially. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've never had the opportunity to come to India. I missed that opportunity when my nephew was in India. He was involved with coffee, and he was in India for about 2 or 3 years. Now he is in New York. So I missed that opportunity, and I don't appreciate the fact that I did not take advantage of that. But God willing, inshallah,
sure, yeah.
I will come to India to visit India soon. And I hope all of the people that are involved right now, that are trying to struggle to support themselves and their family, especially through this pandemic, I wish them all of the luck and understanding that we must wear the face mask. We must constantly wash. More than 20 seconds, my daughter says. And we must keep our distance. And so that's what I wish for them all over the world, and especially in your home country of India.
Thank you very much, Senator Robert Jackson, and have a nice rest of the day, and wish you all the best in the run. Thank you.
Thank you.